And I used to think like that. You're a self-made this. And I'm like, you're not self-made. You're God-made. Everything you do is by grace of God. Every room I've gone in that I shouldn't be in, I've gotten contracts that I'm not qualified for. I've gotten contracts that I didn't have the capacity or capability to do. And I'm like, how did you get this contract? And people look at me like, you got that, you did what? And so you say self-made, and I'm like, it couldn't have been self-made. That had to be God's grace.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of Bootstrap Millionaire. I want to welcome all my bootstrappers to this episode, and I'm excited to have a good friend of mine on today's episode. His name is Marcus Wilson. He's the president and CEO of Intelligence, Inc., which is an Atlanta-based managed IT service provider that serves the needs of over 4,000 end users daily. Now, the good thing about Marcus' situation is that Marcus walked out of prison almost 30 years ago, and he was in a situation where he had to ask himself, now what? He had nowhere to stay. He only had about $90 to his name. Knowing that he was now a felon, he had a couple of options. One was either to be just a total failure, or he could beat the odds and change the narrative, which he did. Fast forward almost 30 years, Marcus has built Intelligence from scratch and is now a multi-million-dollar tech firm. And guys, he did this all with no business degree, no business experience, but just hard work and grace. Marcus, welcome to Bootstrap Millionaire.
Hey, thank you, Tim. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here.
Man, listen, I'm excited. Yeah, honor and a blessing. I'm excited to have you on today's podcast. This is going to be a very insightful, hopefully an enlightened conversation that we will have in hopes to someone listening to this podcast can see themselves in your story, because you have a very, very unique story. And to get things started, let's start from that point, right? Maybe just kind of give us a quick overview of who you are, where you're from. Of course, we already know all about your success, but I always like to tell people there's no success without failure and sacrifice, right? And we all see the glory but don't know the story. So this segment of this conversation, we want to get to know your story. So who is Marcus Wilson?
I'm from, I was born in Chicago. My mom was in school. She had me early in college. And she said she couldn't take care of me, right? So she's trying to get her own self. She's a kid. So she is a kid with a kid. She moved with my grandparents to Greenville, Mississippi. And Greenville is the Delta, right? The dirty South, as they call it. Well, I lived about 45 minutes from where Emmett Till was lynched, right? Mm-hmm. So understanding and coming from that world, I didn't see black wealth. I didn't even know you could be black and drive a Mercedes. I associated certain things with color. If you wanted to do this, you had to be this color. But if you were this color, we drove Impalas, Lincolns, like Brougham Cadillacs with rims. They drove BMWs, Mercedes. We didn't. So my view was warped when it came to anything with us having wealth. So education back then, I saw my mom have a master's degree in education. So education wasn't a problem. It was the association with education, going to school, and still being pretty much broke. So I just never, ever understood the go to school, do all these years, and then come back and struggle paycheck to paycheck like I saw my mom, because I never had my dad. So having a single mom, that clearly was in school. I'm being raised by my grandparents until she got through with school. And to see the struggle she went through having me as a single mom was like, So I opted to go to the Air Force. And obviously spent 4 years, got out, moved to Atlanta. First job, worked for IBM, help desk, about $12 an hour. Still, Atlanta wasn't like it is today. So I still said, I don't see my pathway forward in making $12 an hour. I didn't see the big picture. So in the apartment I was living in, I was connected with one of the guys, and he was selling drugs. And I saw him every day have these high-end cars, and I got a chance to hang out with him, and I gravitated towards him. Hanging out with him, going to eat, going to the clubs, watching him spend thousands of dollars every night, and that money be replenished. And I said, this might be for me. And I got caught up, right? Connected with him. I got in too deep. And at that point, once you're in that deep, it happened, right? I get caught with him, get in trouble. And years later, do time, get out. I'm now a felon, and away we go. Life starts, and I say, now what?
Wow.
I'm now ex-felon. I'm broke, bad credit now, can't even get a bank account, have nowhere to stay. And someone took me in their basement and said, you can stay with me. And that person's name was Earl Johnson. I'll never forget Earl. Earl was like an angel to me.
Was he a family member or a friend?
He was a person I worked with at IBM on the help desk. And he said, you can stay with me and my family. So he put me in his basement, and he said, by the time I got out, he had elevated his technical skill set. He was now doing Novell work. People probably don't even know Novell, right? Microsoft and Novell, right? It's a days. But becoming my first certification was a Novell certified administrator, right? Or CNA. And that was my first cert. So he said, you can bounce back if you focus. So starting from that time in his basement, putting together computers, learning networking, working on my cert. I was able to get that cert, and I didn't look back. I went from the Cisco cert, I went from the Novell cert to Microsoft to Cisco. And from Cisco, I went up the chain in certifications. And about in September 11th, right, the hammer came down. Mm-hmm. And people started, everywhere I went then, it was a background check. Prior, I didn't really have a lot of issues with the background because I had these certs. Back then, there were not a lot of certified people. Certs were just coming out.
Correct.
So it was easy to get a job.
Yeah.
Right? But most people didn't ask for, there was that box. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? That wasn't on a lot of boxes. 9/11 hit. Homeland Security. Iron Curtain came down. Everybody's now asking me, when I fill out, have you ever been convicted? So I'm checking this box. And I'm getting in interviews, and they're like, well, fill out the application. It's like, we can't hire you. What do you
Simply
mean?
because you was a convicted felon.
Came different. So now I'm faced with another challenge. I can't get a job. I got all these skills, but the world is saying, nope. Nope. It was consistent. Nope. Nope. Can't work for any banks. Couldn't work for the government. Couldn't work for the post office. Couldn't work for couldn't even with a felony. You couldn't then. I don't know if the policies changed, so I got to be careful what I say. Mm-hmm. You couldn't even work for McDonald's. Mm-hmm. So, again, I'm faced with fail or thrive. Mm-hmm. So I had to start my own. So I started Intelligence out of desperation. Intelligence is not a orchestrated business that I got out of school because I had no business degree. I'm not a Harvard or Yale student, right?
Correct.
I'm strictly, you got to figure this stuff out. And I want to say it a different way.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Right? I had to figure this out.
Yeah.
Right? Or again, I'm like, keep in mind, with a felony, you're having a hard time even getting an apartment.
That's right.
With your record, right? Mm-hmm. And for the ones that do, I also have bad credit at that point. So I got a lot of problems going on that I'm facing, right? So I can't get a checking account because remember back then, the checking account you got to do a credit check
Yes.
to get a checking account, because it's almost like having credit, because you could just bounce checks and keep it moving. So I got like everything I do, money order. You know, back in the day, you could take the money order, pay rent. But the problem is that now sometimes I can't either. So I had to go to the apartment and say, hey, I got to pay you 6 months in advance for you to give me an opportunity to stay here. So I started basing everything off of like, you got to work hard because you got to pay cash so that you can live somewhere. So when people are saying start a business so they can have wealth, I started a business so I could have an apartment.
Right.
So I could get a car to drive myself around. And I had a daughter that I had before, you know, her mom was pregnant before I went in. So when I walked out, my daughter is 2 years old or something, right? And I'm walking out and I now got this child, right? And she needs help and I'm broke. So it's been nothing but challenges. So all my whole life, I've never had anything easy. So intelligence was desperation.
So let's take a step back. What intrigued, because when you met your friend and you kind of got into the drug dealing with him, what attracted you to that? Because you were working a job. You were working with IBM, right? You was in the tech field. But what do you think gravitated you to that line of business, so to speak?
Because I looked backwards and I saw in Mississippi, right? I looked backwards. And in the neighborhoods, the people that were successful in the black side, right, that were either athletes or drug dealers, period, right? The people with master's degrees, PhDs, they were living paycheck to paycheck. So I didn't associate education and degrees with wealth. I saw no connection between the two. Yeah, you can go get 3 degrees, right? But you still can be living paycheck to paycheck, right? But I saw the dope dealers drive these cars with back then and have wads of money. So I associated, like, for us, not being able to see black people drive a Mercedes, I just associated and said, hey, here's our way out. Since I'm not an athlete, not going to pro whatever, this is my pathway. And I ended up again going to the military, right? I could have gone to college. I could have gone to J-State, different colleges, right? Could have got a scholarship or whatever. But I just didn't see college as the way forward for me.
Yeah.
So connecting with this person was all about the immediate gratification of wealth.
Do you think that your experience, not glorifying drug dealing, but do you think that your experience, or do you think did you learn anything from that experience that helped you in business today? Because we talked about this off camera, about how, unfortunately, drug dealing is a form of business, right? Supply chain and all that type of thing. Do you think that you learned some things from that experience that helped you become a better business person today? Unfortunately, talking about the topic, I would have to say yes, because you do learn the foundational parts, right? You have a product. Unfortunately, it's illegal. You get it, which is supply chain, right? So it becomes a cost of goods sold, right? You move it. That's your supply chain, distribution from point A to point B, and you put a profit on top of it, right? That's your margin or your markup or whatever you want to call it, based on your business. And if you look at that whole thing, right, that's how our entire supply chain works, right? Absolutely. I have a product or service. It has a cost. I put my margin on it, and I basically put it out for sale, right? I market it to whoever my customer is. And that principle holds true across the board. So if you look at that, I just didn't understand things like balance sheets, right?
Profit and loss statements. I had the concept, but the balance sheet, I would hear people say, when I went into these high-end meetings with other now business owners, and I'm going through all these cohorts, and I'm learning, like, what's above the line and below the line. I'm like, what's above the line and below the line? I didn't understand P&L statements. I didn't understand balance sheets, right? That's all been self-taught. That's learning, right? Years of learning, sitting in rooms, learning from other people, feeling like a complete idiot. Some of the most embarrassing times is when you get in a room with a bunch of people that are much, much, much smarter than you. And you learn that, but you learn you need to be in those rooms. They always told me, like, now I always feel like when I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's so true in my life, because if it wasn't for being in those rooms, feeling uncomfortable with these people that were more educated, the people coming out of class and they got MBAs and they understand, they can break down what's cost of goods sold and what your balance sheet should look like, right? And what's cash on cash return. And I'm like, oh, this is great stuff. And I'm sitting there taking all these notes. And that actually starts to sink in, and it helps you grow. Right?
How do you overcome that, right? I would imagine sitting in that room, knowing your background, all the way from growing up in Mississippi to, being a felon, you probably felt inadequate.
I did.
How did you overcome those feelings to propel yourself forward?
I still feel like that today. I wish I could truly say I'm over that. And there's some rooms I walk in, I still say, man, I'm still not there where I want to be, right? So I don't think for me, that feeling of being honest is never going away.
Never going away.
I just learned not to let it stop me, right? There's a difference. Fear, I think everybody's scared of something. I've just learned not to let it stop me from going in that door, right? And that's, if God has opened the door for me, I'm going to go through, right? And it doesn't matter about how uncomfortable I am, how scared I am. I'm just going to go through it, and I'm going to figure it out, right? So I've lived a whole life of figuring stuff out. Nothing's been easy. I've just figured things out. And, people start saying, oh, you're self-made. I'm like, and I used to think like that. You're a self-made this. And I'm like, you're not self-made. You're God-made. Everything you do is by grace of God. Every room I've gone in that I shouldn't be in, I've gotten contracts that I'm not qualified for. I've gotten contracts that I didn't have the capacity or capability to do. And I'm like, how did you get this contract? And people look at me like, you got that, you did what? And so you say self-made, and I'm like, it couldn't have been self-made. That had to be God's grace, right? He was walking in the room with you, right? And you were sitting there, you just had to show up. He had already orchestrated everything for you. So you had the job before you walked in. You just need to show up. And sometimes I feel like people, when we're scared, we don't show up. Sometimes you just got to show up and have faith, right? That something else is happening that you don't know. And sometimes we're not successful because we don't walk through that door. I've seen that a lot with people, right? Especially us, is that we feel like we're scared or we're inadequate and we don't walk through that door. And I felt like that a lot. I've just learned it's just going to be uncomfortable,
right?
Right?
Yeah.
Go through that door.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
How do you think the current system now, because obviously you went through the system, you were able to pull yourself out of that, but there are a lot of men, particularly black men, that never get over that hump, that never come out of prison and go to the next level, right? And we talked about how the system is really designed to kind of hold us down, right? What do you think about the current way the current system is today, right? And do you think that it is designed to hold particularly African Americans back from achieving great things?
Well, if you think about it, the system, it kind of mimics slavery. Think about it. So I keep up with these stats because I work with young black men out of prison. So I keep with the stats. I read the Department of Corrections report every month. And right now, there are 58,000 people locked up. Over 28,000 black men, which equates to 67-point-something%. This is on paper. You can verify it by going to the Department of Corrections and downloading it, right? It's a report, it's public. So how do we make up 13% of the population? but 67% of the prison system. Can anybody, no one can explain that, right? When you ask the question, they can't explain it. But if you look at sentence disparity, just think about it. You have a drug charge, and you have somebody that might be white that has a possession charge. But if you put, that's probation. But if I give you possession with intent to distribute, it's now a 20-year charge or a 10-year charge, and you're a felon.
So how do they define the whole point of possession with intent to distribute? How do they even define that, right? Because, like I said, some people can have possession, but it's that intent to distribute component that really gets you the large time.
Who is your DA and who is your judge? Who do you vote for? Who's appointed? Right? People say we don't have power at the polls. Sorry. It's who you vote for. It's who's sitting in that seat. Who's the DA? What's the DA's policy? Right? How do they see you? Right? Who's the judge? How does the judge see you? Does he or she feel, or they feel that your sentence is not harsh enough? Right? So possession versus possession with intent versus trafficking is more, yeah, it could be the weight of the drug, but it's how it's packaged or whatever. It's what they're going to charge you with. Right? What do they want to push towards you, right? Because you can pretty much, they can drop the charge and say, I'm going to reduce the charge and give you possession, and you can walk out, right? And you can get probation. Yeah. They can see that you need some type of other therapy or whatever, right? Where you put you on probation, monitor your progress, give you another chance, or they can give you a 10-year sentence and change your whole life and put you in prison and make you work for very little money. If you think about it, right? Slavery. I put you in a place, I pay you very little, right? And I profit from you. What's the difference? One, you're still in prison. You just might not be behind bars. So a lot of times when you walk out of prison, keep in mind, I didn't understand this until I got out. When you get a charge, when you have a felony or something like that, it's a life sentence. You just are not locked up. So I almost feel like the sentence should be, it's a life sentence. It's just that how much time am I going to spend behind or being incarcerated? It's very straightforward. They don't have to listen to me. Why don't you do your research, right? So these are the challenges. Like, so when young men get out, or whoever, and they're trying to figure their ways out, a lot of times they say we have second chance programs. Sometimes we don't have a first chance. I'm working with a young man right now. He's a foster kid. He's never known his parents. And he can't get a job because he has a felony, right? And I'm trying to find things for him. I'm everything, right? And it's his record because he's still on, so to speak, probation. And they give us these long sentences of probation. Like, why would you give me a 10-year sentence and serve 8 on probation? Like 8 years? I got to walk the fine line of probation for 8 years?
Wow.
I'm like walking with 1 foot in jail and 1 foot out of jail, right?
Yeah.
8 years?
Yeah.
So these are challenges that we face every single day, right? But for some reason, we make up 67% of the system. I can't explain that.
So now, when you think about, like, marijuana now is practically or about to become legal, right, across the country, right? But if you think about it, years ago, particularly when Clinton, I think it was Clinton who did Clinton and Biden. It was probably Clinton and Biden combined, right?
Correct.
Right. And you think about all the young men, all the young black men that went to jail for marijuana possession, right? But now marijuana is becoming practically legal. Someone who's been in that situation like yourself, how do you feel about that?
Well, it became profitable to the government. Seeing things their way, it became a profit center. So they turned something illegal because they see it was going to happen anyway, right? And they turned it and said, this can make us profit. How else can you define something that's been illegal? And all of a sudden, they say you can remove a chemical, right? And then you can make it now legal. And then on every corner now, I see a CBD, where I say some type of store, some type of gummy, some type of oil, some type of whatever, right, that makes me feel better, right? I can sleep. I can put it on my foot, on everything, right? So how can you say that? Again, it's who we vote for. It's who's in office. And that stuff really matters, right? So whatever color you are, blue, red, they say Democrat, Republican, we should always worry about who is in office, because if you look at President Biden back in the day, the 3-strike, one of the framers, right? Think about it.
Yes.
These people are framing these rules like 3-strike rules, right? Well, you know 100% that's going to impact the black community. We're in poverty. You're putting the drugs in the neighborhood, and now a 3-strike rule? Right? These are real situations that people really don't do their research. So when I vote for somebody, I actually do my research. I want to know what they stand for. I want to know what they did. Not 2 years ago, but 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So being someone who has pulled yourself from out of that situation, now having a multi-million-dollar business. I know that we talked off camera about you having a nonprofit or that you're starting. Well, why is that important for you? Why is that important for you to now reach back and help other young men who are going through some of the same situation?
Because I am them.
Yeah.
That's simple. Bounce back is not a... Bounce back, I feel like, is God's purpose for my life. I think that he gave me intelligence to restore, right? So you can live a productive life, so you can do purpose work. And I just feel like now it's about purpose. And I think that bounce back is about purpose, building a purpose-built organization that provides technical training. The same thing I had an opportunity to use to restore my life. I can now do the same thing on a mass scale and change lives. Because everybody who's sitting in that prison system comes out, they're not bad people. They just made bad decisions.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's not a murderer or a rapist. Some people just made bad decisions, and it cost them dearly. And now they're looking for a chance. So Bounce Back is not a second chance program. Some people never had a first chance. Bounce Back is a way for restoration, right? Provides a marketable skill set that can be used to go on to do something like, hopefully one day, get a job where people are not holding your entire past against you, or build yourself a business. But you have a lot of entrepreneur programs now, right? And the thing is how can you have a business and you don't have a skill set, a service or a product you need to sell? So it's like putting the cart before the horse. So we're trying to give people a marketable skill set to give them a fighting chance. Whether they want to build a business or not is a personal choice. But having a job so they can have a productive life, a thriving life, take care of their kids, that's, I think, everyone's right.
Right, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't think you should be judged on your past, right? I do not think, as Bounce Back says, if you look on the website, it says it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Absolutely.
And I'm a firm believer of how I'm going to finish. How I start, I got to look back. You can't move forward looking in the rearview mirror.
Absolutely.
You can't drive that way.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. I want to get into the conversation around the skill set.
Okay.
Right? You obviously grabbed hold of the technology and has built a thriving business off of the skill set of technology. And so in part 2 of our conversation, I want to talk about how the tech field has transformed your life and how it can also help transform the lives of other people. So we'll be right back, Bootstrappers, for the second part of my conversation with Mr. Marcus Wilson. We'll be right back.